Okay, so this week we're going to start with something that is going to make probably about half of our viewers uncomfortable.
At least.
At least.
And yeah.
There you go.
Oh, good. Now all of them have dropped off between the promise about the topic they don't want to hear about and the fact that I was in the wrong part of our show. There's nobody left.
They're all gone. They're all gone. So, okay, because here's what we're going to talk about. Like this notion of when you were on the job market, did you actually understand your retirement package? Like, or did you just nod while someone was like 403B and think, oh, sure, that sounds adult?
I did nod very confidently, not at the visit, because at the visit they just talked at me and all I heard was wah, 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 wah. Oh. My mother-in-law was an investment, so she explained it to me and I also pretended to understand.
Yeah, well, so like, as academics, we will read Foucault, we will parse language, we will debate the moral arc of arguments and assessment rubrics, but yet when HR will say something like vesting schedule, we think it's about New York Fashion Week. And
it should be.
It should be, right? Like we've known what a vestment schedule is our entire lives, but here's the problem is that institutions that we work for absolutely understand our retirement packages. They have teams of people who understand it. Like that's literally their jobs. And we're just expected to like absorb it through vibes. So today in this episode, we're doing something mildly radical. We're going to talk about what these terms mean. Okay. 401k, 403b, pension, vesting. Do you know your expense ratio?
I do not.
Because if you're on the job market right now, or you are pre-tenure, or even if you're like an associate professor who's mid-career, that'd be me. And quietly like hoping retirement will eventually happen. I have some unfortunate news because it does eventually sort itself out. Like you do eventually reach retirement age. And sometimes if you don't know what you're doing, that sorting is not necessarily in your favor.
Yes, and that's not ominous at all, especially for somebody who's full professor and is starting to say, that retirement thing, is it gonna ever come? And if it comes, what am I gonna do? So it is really important to say all of this. And I am, in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking about what happens with Social Security. That used to be something we could all say, it's gonna be there. And now we're saying, it will maybe be there, maybe possibly. Just part of it will be there. I don't believe it will totally disappear, but I don't know that we'll get everything that we think we're going to get.
Oh yeah, well, and that's one of the reasons why it feels so ominous, because it is structural. And just a quick pause here, right here, because this is not financial advice, okay? We are not financial advisors. Academic advisors, yes. Financial advisors, no. Not happening, right? We are two academics who have learned this the hard way. Some of us the hard way. Some of us had, stepmothers who were financial advisors. Do I remember this correctly?
Not stepmother, just mother-in-law, but
just mother-in-law. Okay, mother-in-law.
Yeah. Mother-in-law, because it needed to be. I came from Israel, totally different system for retirement, for everything. And therefore, coming here, it was, okay, I need to save for what? I need to decide how much money. Very confusing. Still is, actually.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about vocabulary. We're going to talk about structures. We're going to talk about some of our maybe own strategies, but also that's what's worked for us. Do not duplicate that because what's the phrase? Results may vary.
Results may vary, and it is very much generational. So the situation we faced when we got into the job market may be very different than the one you're facing.
Yeah,
let's face it.
So I'm Nick. I'm an associate professor of elementary literacy education K6 here at UNL.
I'm Guy. I'm a professor of innovative learning technologies here at UNL.
And if this episode does anything aside from maybe make you uncomfortable, hopefully it sends you to your own plan documents or to someone with, I don't know, an actual financial planning license, or, at minimum to Google to better your vocabulary.
Preferably not Reddit.
No, definitely not.
But maybe AI.
Reddit. Ooh, AI could be helpful.
Yeah,
Within some boundaries.
Yeah,
because so today we're about literacy. We're not about portfolio construction, because it's not about being financially naive in a system that benefits from your confusion.
So basically, our plan is to ruin everyone's blissful ignorance, at least for today.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. So correct, and you're welcome. The disclaimer is a little long, but I needed it.
We needed it.
We needed it.
We needed a disclaimer, and we're disclaiming again. Neither us nor AI is a financial advisor,
No.
although we have learned a few things along the way.
Yes. Unfortunately.
So let's pretend someone just got a job offer like tomorrow, and they see 401k, 403b, pension. Do they actually know what those words mean? Do they?
I mean, potentially not. Like, a lot of these words are used interchangeably, right? And having moved from multiple retirement systems, it's going to differ upon your institution. And most people are familiar at least with a 401k.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's kind of the most common retirement savings account out there, but it's really private sector based. So corporations have them, businesses have them. You tend not to see them in higher ed as much. What you end up seeing is, a 403b, and that's the nonprofit higher ed version of that 401k. Structurally similar, slightly different tax code. And with any 401k, it's really important to realize that it's not a pension. Right? Like, those two things are very separate.
So how are they different?
So really, it's about responsibility. It's who is responsible for those funds. If you are fortunate enough to have a pension, the financial responsibility for that pension falls on the institution.
Yeah.
They are required to have a certain amount of money in that pension fund to pay out the agreed upon amounts to the people within that pension fund. So that's not your responsibility as an individual. That's an institutional responsibility.
Absolutely. Although if you're working for a state institution, sometimes it's institutional, and sometimes that's like a statewide system. Sometimes in some states, for example, the state institutions have it as part of a state system for teachers or for all of higher ed.
Right.
So it's not necessarily just your institution. It may be bigger. And looking into that, I think, is important.
Yeah. So when I talk about institution, I'm talking about a financial institution, not necessarily an institution of higher ed.
Good to know.
So for instance, when I was in Wisconsin, Wisconsin has a pension system, and it's a collaborative institution, financial institution that covers higher ed, but also K-12 teaching, community colleges, et cetera, et cetera.
So it's a big, huge fund.
Yes.
Which makes it very powerful.
Yep.
But things I've learned recently is they're not all fully funded.
Yeah, and this is where pensions sometimes can be tricky, right? This is where you are promised this amount of money every so often through a pension that you have contributed to, but ultimately the responsibility is on that institution
Yeah.
in order to get that money out. But if it's not funded, that's a thing, right? So it was a big thing in 2009.
After the crash
Yep,
and everything
GM,
else.
particularly, I remember so much news about their pension and how they needed to stabilize that. So that's part of why you see a lot of that out in the news when things happen in the stock market. Versus like a 401k or a 403b, that is kind of what they call a defined contribution plan. So ultimately the responsibility for that is on you. You're the one putting in money, and however much money you put into that is
That's what you have.
will have.
And the flip side of this is the money is not going to be undervested or what you have is what you have. What you see in that account is real money, not fake money. I mean, all money is fake, but you know.
It's not symbolic. Like that's an
Yes.
actual number
That you can theoretically pull out.
theoretically do something with, right?
Absolutely.
So that notion of how much you put in and how you invest it within that plan is important to pay attention to, and not assuming that 401k or 403b is a pension. They're not, right? Defined contribution plan versus defined benefit plan, the responsibilities are different there, right? One promises income, the other promises a balance. And once you understand the difference between those two, one you can be very passive about because it's not your responsibility.
Yeah.
The other one you do have to be somewhat active with, but
Within reason.
within reason, like the ways that your system is investing money in these retirement plans, 403bs or what have you, they are the containers, and there's going to be a limited number of options within them.
Okay, so I have a 403b,
Yes.
right? That's what I was offered. When I got here, I had column A or column B, and I chose column B, obviously. You always choose column B.
Always.
Always.
I want to see
And
when price
so is this my investment, or is this just, what is it?
Okay, so I find a really helpful way for me to think about this as someone who, no one in my family has ever retired, by the way. I mean,
So you're hoping to be first generation.
in so many ways. Because like if I can get through being the first generation, like college grad, first generation graduate grad, can I be the first generation retirement person?
And that's true for first generation. There's another way to be first generation, and that is when you move between countries, between a country that's mostly pension oriented, which is Israel, and many countries in Europe or in the Middle East. I have many international students. All of these notions are very, very strange, and people don't even know they're there. That's why we were talking about it, right? Yeah. If you're born here and you grew up in this system, it's still confusing. But if you're born somewhere else, you just assume there's a pension. I mean, I've always assumed there's just a pension.
There's just a pension.
Yeah, I mean,
deal.
Doesn't everybody have a pension? Obviously not.
No.
So.
No.
Neither. So I don't have one either. But some universities do have a pension system. So
actually, we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that. Circle back.
So think about your 403b as kind of a bucket. It's a container. And your investments go within that bucket. And there's a couple of different, like fairly common options that you'll see. The first is an index fund, which these are, instead of owning one single stock, like, you own 28 shares of Apple.
I wish, but sure.
Right? Same. But instead of owning like full shares of stocks and organizing based upon stocks, an index fund based upon a theme, and there's multiple index funds that cover The entire...
Depending on the index, really.
Right. There's multiple indexes. There's no one index. So some of them cover the entirety of the stock market. Some of them cover just all the AI tech that's happening right now. Some of them cover green businesses. Like, they have themes. And so you want to pay attention to them because they'll give you fractional shares of all of those stocks, everything in that index, every time you contribute. Like, that's the index part of it. So it distributes your risk. It tends to perform exactly like the stock market will perform overall. And so that's where the elimination of risk happens. So like, if you only own one stock and that stock tanks.
Yeah, and any single stock can tank.
Any single stock can tank, right? And so when you have an index, the ones that, rise and the ones that tank a little bit, they average out. Now, the other thing that you will often find is a target date fund. And typically these are a variation of an index fund, but they're tied to a specific retirement year. And the way that they've been structured is they move from slightly higher risk investments early on, because that's typically where you see a lot of monetary growth.
Yep.
And then as you get closer and closer and closer to that retirement date, they shift into safer and safer indexes. So that target date fund is meant to start out slightly risky and then slowly but surely get safer and safer as you get closer to the point where you're going to actually have some money pulled out of that account.
And that, in a weird way, despite the fact that it sounds like you can put it on autopilot, at least from my experience, the target date funds actually need more active management because they are also related to your plans. So when you start out, it's not a problem. But as you get closer to retirement, if you suddenly say, I thought I'll retire at 70, I'm actually going to retire at 65, you need to make some adjustments. And you have to pay attention to markets because I've actually had a situation where a target date fund that wasn't a retirement fund, that was a college savings fund, did the transition exactly at the lowest point in the market. And so there's a potential, if there's like a fall in the markets that you think is temporary, it's not forever, and there's never been a forever drop. And so if I would have waited another 2 years, I would have had a lot more money. But because it automatically, the target date was automatically imposed, I go, oh no, but it's too late. So it does require a little bit of management, I would argue.
Yeah. Well, and there's also things like bond funds, right, which are connected to loans that are made to, public governments, et cetera, and those are a bit more
less volatile for the most
less
part.
Volatile, they're more stable. They're a little bit trickier because they only come up at certain times. So But
again, going back to if you're doing it through that container of a 403b or 401k, they will do that work for you. So you don't have to do that work. They have broad categories that will do that specific work and will say, here's our bond fund, invest here, or here's our index, here are the possible index funds. So they do help you in that. All right.
And then the thing to keep in mind with all of these, as you're looking at these options that are going to be through whatever vendor your institution has gone with, is you want to think about expense ratios.
Okay, what's an expense ratio?
Okay, so an expense ratio is that whole notion of, they're doing this for you.
Yeah.
No one's doing anything for free. And this is where the
okay.
expense ratio
Okay,
comes
the
in.
expense, what we're paying the people who take care of our staff.
Yes. And
Yes,
so that's going to
very
be the
important.
expense ratio. And
Okay.
so you'll sometimes see like a 0.05% expense ratio versus like a 0.78 or 0.75 expense ratio.
Yeah.
What that is yearly or every 3 months. It depends on the terms.
Yeah.
They take that percentage of your fund in order to pay for the people who manage it, right? So
They are working.
they are working. Like it's. I mean, yeah,
They're taking some risk.
they're taking some risk, right? So like that's a cost.
Yeah.
To that, and you want to be aware of that because the higher the expense ratio, the more money they're taking out.
Yeah. So even if you're making a little bit more, they're taking a little bit more.
Right. And so that can really add up to a lot of money for you. Now, if sometimes there are funds that are doing really, really well, and part of that is because it's not AI driven, it's actual people who are doing some daily work there, your expense ratio might be a little bit higher, but what you're gaining from that is also a little bit higher. So it's always something to keep in mind that there's a balance there. But you want to always keep in mind there's two, when you're thinking about these containers, two decisions that are of the utmost importance. The first is how much you contribute, and two, thinking through how that money is invested.
Yes.
Right? So, morphology, vest.
Vest. Oh, so we're back to vests. I
back
should
to
have
vests.
worn a vest today.
Oh, you could have worn a vest. I should have warned you. Sorry.
I should have worn a vest today. But hey, what does it mean to vest? Because I don't have a pension, so...
Okay, so here's vesting. Here's what we want to be thinking about. When you ask about vesting, vesting is always about when, let's start here. Your contributions to any retirement plan are yours. Always.
Yeah.
Now, when you're working for an institution of higher education or other places, there's always going to be this notion of matching. And when you're thinking about matching, it's always you're going to contribute this and your institution is going to contribute this. And that's what goes into your retirement fund. Here's where vesting becomes important, and you want to understand the terms of vesting. Is sometimes that money does not become yours until you've been there for a certain amount of time or hit particular benchmarks. Once you hit those benchmarks, whether it's time or what have you, then you become vested. And once you're vested, that money that the institution has matched becomes yours fully, right? So you always want to think about what are the kinds of vesting that are happening, right? Like there's cliff vesting.
Okay.
So if you're there for a certain amount of time, you get 100% of it after, 6 years, right? Or there's like graded vesting, which if you're there for a certain amount of time, you get this much. If you're there for a certain amount of time, you get this much, et cetera, et cetera. Like it's this graduated scale.
Investing is also for pensions.
Yes.
Right? So in pensions, you get income, but that is proportional to how many years you put in. And that is really important. And it's important to know a priori, if to be fully vested, you need 25 years. That's very different than gradually vesting and being able to say, I'm moving to another institution, because it does kind of shackle you to a specific state or to a specific system.
Yeah. And so when you're thinking about investing, that portability question, sometimes people will talk about a sunken fallacy cost to their retirement.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that that's not something to consider. I've considered it myself several times, particularly when I came here. I wasn't vested yet in the Wisconsin pension fund
Yeah.
you needed 6 years in that system to be vested.
Okay.
The choice to leave that system was more important than reaching vestment.
Yes.
And so once that happened, I was able to request my funds, the funds that I had contributed to that fund, to be delivered to me as a check. And then, but I didn't get anything that the university
So no
contributed.
match,
So no match, just my funds, and then I used that to do some other things. So you want to be aware of vesting and keeping that in your head once you are thinking about, am I staying here? Am I leaving? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't need to be your entire decision. Like your entire decision doesn't have to be based on that, but you do want to put that into your equation somewhere.
And that's really relevant when you have multiple job offers, because if you have just one job offer, it's a take it or leave it.
Right.
So that gets easier, but if you have multiple job offers, that's one of the things you want to consider as you're looking at that offer and saying, do I want to be here or there? That system and your prediction about how long do you think you're going to hang around helps, although we never know, right? Institution may choose to close a department. You may choose, this is not the place for me. I thought it would be great. I'm actually suffering, and you will move. And that's a cost you have to keep in mind.
Right. And so that's where you need like determining importance.
Yes.
Right. And you need to be thinking through how losing that money, can you afford to lose that money? And if you're earlier in your career, it tends to be a little bit of an easier loss to take. But that's just me. Again, this is not financial advice. I don't actually know what I'm doing.
But obviously, when you have more time towards retirement, no matter what age you are, this is the day where you have the most amount of time till retirement, right? And no matter when in your life you're starting out, the earlier times are easier to move around. You're losing less, you've got more options, and you'll have enough time to recoup whatever you need. I came to the United States in my 30s. Until I got a job, it was even later. So I needed to go fast, but it is possible.
Yeah,
and it's fun.
It's totally possible. It's totally fine. You want to be thinking through that matching notion. What can you get matched?
Yeah.
You also want to go with this, if you're leaving an institution, figuring out the portability of that. So like Missouri, I have a pension from Missouri.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Right? So I was vested based upon the contributions that I made. Every year I sit down and I do a quick like checking in on everything, just to be like, okay, what can I expect from here? What is this target here? There's a lot of really good tools out there that help you do that kind of work. And one of the interesting things that sometimes happens with those pensions is, remember, they're benefit oriented. And so whatever institution that is responsible for that payout. So I have gotten every year an offer to buy out my pension from that institution. They want to just buy me out, and then it's not there. Give you this big lump sum of money, and then poof, it's gone. You don't get that anymore. And that's another decision to think through, right?
That's where financial advisor, not financial
advisors,
doctor. But that's where a financial advisor, even a one-time financial advisor would, or maybe especially one-time financial advisor who's just selling you advice, nothing else, no product, would be useful to kind of wrap your brain around those decisions and what they mean long-term and what are the alternatives, because it's always about opportunity cost. It's always about what is something else you could do with that money. And so that's something to consider. So somebody has hung with us for this whole time talking about vests and indexes and all of these things, and are now looking at the screen and saying, so what am I going to do? What do you want them to do right now?
Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Because retirement is ominous. Retirement is scary, but it becomes less scary once you know numbers. So the first thing that I want you to do is breathe. Like, just take a big, deep breath. This is not going to ruin your life. It's going to help you plan for whatever future it is that you want, right? Like, this introduced you to vocabulary. 403b, index funds, vesting, la, 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 right? And then go look at your plan documents. Go find those logins to all of your accounts and put them in one space and look at what you have, right? If you're in higher ed, maybe you have retirement stuff from other jobs that you've had, whatever it is, but get it all in one space. Not tomorrow, not when things calm down, because chances are if you have a standing desk, you spent more time choosing what that standing desk would be than like compiling all of this information.
And that's not wrong, because a standing desk doesn't give me anxiety.
Right.
But money might.
Well, and one of the ways to combat that anxiety, and this is my own personal, I feel lots of anxiety about retirement because I don't know how to do it. But once I have numbers, I feel better.
Yeah.
Like, that's actionable to me, right? Because I can love my work, I can love the mission, I can love what I do as an academic, but I can also still read the fine print. Like, this is part of my total compensation package. And these are not mutually exclusive traits. Like, we can do the work we love, but also ensure that we're setting ourselves up for when we're no longer doing that work.
Absolutely. And really, for me, one of the things that I found really surprising is how different retirement plans are across universities. I've been my whole life in one university, so I'm not really open to that. We've talked, I've seen what happens in other universities, and that opened my eyes to it's very, very different out there. So don't assume that the system you're in right now or the first system that comes along is the only way to do things. It is radically different.
Right. And so keep in mind that you're not retiring tomorrow, chances are.
Yeah.
But you
16 years, by the way.
Is that where we're at?
Yeah, 15 and a half, but yeah.
I mean, so the thing that this is all about is you don't want to be surprised by decisions you made at 30 when you're 60 and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm just so happy someone hired me. You know, you want to be able to plan for yourself. You want to know what's out there, and we can only do that with data.
So, the homework is?
Okay, so here's your homework. Figure out what you have. Figure that out. What types, if they're index funds, if they're various financial products, find out what your expense ratios are. How much is that costing you? You want to get in touch with whoever your retirement vendor is. It could be TIAA CREF, it could be Vanguard, could be a variety of different companies, but they all have people to talk to. Schedule an appointment, ask those questions, because there's not, I mean, the only stupid question here in this realm is, did I save for retirement? Like, don't ask that one. Know what you have, know what's there, right? This is not difficult. We are smart, we are literate, we can do this.
These are very bold words from two men who once nodded through a benefits presentation or two or three.
Yeah, just one.
Just one?
Yeah, after the Missouri one, I was like, oh, I need to know. Do. Like,
yeah. And I get now a regular email. We have a not pension planning, but retirement planning seminar. And I'm like, I'm not retiring anytime soon.
Have you started getting you're retiring in 14 years? And I'm like, what? That long?
That short? Sorry.
Right? So, but we're evolving,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
and if this episode did nothing else, I hope it makes you slightly more annoying in negotiations. Like, I want a little bit more matching, and sometimes I can do that, sometimes I can't.
So, if you're still with us, go forth and compound wisely.
And for the love of all things Vygotsky, read your plan documents. We'll see you in the next one.